Now we're going to hear from a very valuable colleague from the Department of Trade, Industry and Commerce, or Competition, Mr. Khumalo, who's going to be online with us this morning, and he's going to give us some feedback on the progress on this bilateral discussion between South Africa and the European Union on the MRL conundrum. And we heard this morning in our first session, there's very often a straight unilateral decision made by the EU on MRLs, and that jeopardizes export nations like ourselves. So I'm going to invite Mr. Khumalo now to talk to us, and I'll sit back and let us hear him. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. Hopefully I am audible that side. Definitely for me is to first thank the CropLife South Africa for inviting the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition to this timely and a very informative conference. Definitely today I will just provide a brief report in terms of the European Union regulation on import tolerance regarding the maximum residue level for clothianidin and as well diamedoxygen, of which are pesticides in or on certain products. Definitely, who we are, we are the department, and then within that department there is a branch called Industrial Competitiveness and Growth, and under that branch as well there is a directorate, and in that directorate is responsible for the work of technical infrastructure in South Africa on matters related to standardizations, technical regulations, metrology, accreditation, and conformity assessment procedure. In the context of South Africa, the basis of this work emanated from the 5 legislative instruments, and on this point, my apology, I will want to add to others legislation perhaps that will be required to be considered for harmonization as per the advisory of the previous speaker. These legislations are Standard Act number 8 of 2008, and the second one is the National Regulator for Compulsory Specification, Act number 5 of 2008, and the third one is the Legal Metrology Act, of which is Act number 9 of 2004, and the fourth one is the Accreditation Act for Conformity, Calibration, and Good Regulatory Practice Act number 19 of 2006. And the last one is the Measurement Unit and Measurement Standard Act number 18 of 2006. These legislative instruments thereby establish South Africa's quality infrastructure system composed of 4 entities. And these entities are South African Bureau of Standard, of which is commonly known SABS, and the second one is the National Regulator for Compulsory Specification, of which is known as the NRCS, and the third one is the South African National Accreditation System, of which is known as SANAS, and the last one is the National Metrology Institute of South Africa, of which is called shortly NMISA. The oversight of this legislative and policy management of South Africa's quality infrastructure system resides with the DTIC, of which is the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, under the directorate of which is called the Technical Infrastructure. Also, the directorate, including the Directorate of Market Access for Trade Policy Division of the DTIC, looks after the work of technical barriers to trade, which is one of the important pillars for market access. Today, I am requested to provide the feedback regarding the CropLife request to intervene on the matter related to the European Union on import tolerance for the 2 substances. It is important to indicate that South Africa considered the request and resolved on a 2-pronged approach, where first we provide a written comment to the EU and thereafter embark on obtaining a bilateral meeting with the European Union. The first approach, we have written the comments where we have filed on the 2nd of September, and the European Union has confirmed the receipt of our comments in relation to the measure on import tolerance regarding the maximum residue level for two substances. However, the response in this regard is yet to come from the European Union, of which I will address it later on in my feedback. Thereafter, we have tried to secure a bilateral meetings with the EU. At this stage, the EU is reluctant to meet on the matter, of which I will explain it later on why they are in that position at this stage. So, however, we are optimistic that we will meet with them because we want to formally meet with them so that we have a strategic approach on the proposed measure that they have on the MRLs. Additionally, what we have done, South Africa attended the World Trade Organization Committee on Technical Barriers to Trade during the week of the 14th to the 18th of November 2022. In this meeting, countries, including South Africa, has resolved to table the measure to lower the MRLs by the European Union to the WTO as a specific trade concern. These countries are Kenya, United States, Japan, Costa Rica, India, Vietnam, Australia, Indonesia, Brazil, Canada, Paraguay, Uruguay, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Brazil, New Zealand, Argentina, and Guatemala. South Africa's approach to this specific trade concern was structured in the context of a clarity-seeking question to enable us to have a bilateral engagement so that we'll have a strategic approach on the matter at hand. Our approach in this regard is that we appreciated that the EU notified the committee regarding the proposed measure to lower the MRLs for two substances, and also South Africa understand that the EU intends to address the environmental concern of global nature, namely the decline of the pollinators worldwide. South Africa also shared the EU's Commission's goals for food systems transformation and the commitment to address climate change, biodiversity loss by continuing to pursue more sustainable and resilient food system. However, South Africa recognized that countries have unique sustainability objectives and challenges. Amongst other related climate changes, South Africa has high pest and disease pressures due to the combination of heat, humidity, and moisture emanating from different weeds, pests, and fungi. Addressing these opportunities or challenges require the use of diverse methods, tools, and technologies to sustainably meet the world's growing demand for food, feed in the face of climate change. South Africa promotes more sustainable and good agricultural practices and food system that emphasize the best mix of tools and techniques to achieve a more sustainable production depending on countries' varying location, scales, and environment. South Africa noted the lowering of MRLs for two substances expand the scope of the existing MRLs regulations beyond the consumer protection to cater the environmental consideration. The proposed measure of the lowering of MRLs for two substances will have adverse effect on agricultural and agri-food exports to the EU. Ultimately, the proposed measure may restrict trade of safer agricultural products, disrupt production, and negatively affect the livelihood of small and rural producers. South Africa supports transparency, science, and risk-based decision-making driven by available data to enhance sustainability in agriculture and urges the EU to take cognizance of climate conditions, crop pest matrices, and socio-economic conditions of developing and underdeveloping economies in the developing and the implementation of this measure. Additionally, South Africa requested clarity in the following technical questions. First, is that confirmation if the regulation is enforced, the MRL will decrease to 0.01. If not, what are the applicable product-specific levels? Confirmation that the EU has banned the use of the two substances in all applications, including the use in the permanent greenhouses. If not, will this product also have to adhere to the new MRLs? Since the EU has implemented the ban on the outdoor of the use of the two substances, what alternatives are used in the EU and what was the cost implications to the farmers? The regulation include one of the statement, of which is 5.1. It says that in order to meet the needs of the international trade, applications for import tolerance for two substances may submit the pursuant may be submitted pursuant to Article 7 of the Regulations number 396/2005 and should provide relevant information to demonstrate that the good regulatory practices applying for specific uses of the active substances are safe for pollinators. In this regard, what is the process to be followed and what is proposed as a turnaround time? And I believe South Africa in this clause we can actively engage with the EU and find an amicable solution so that we prevent the adverse effects to the export that are exported to the EU. A chairperson or a program director, ladies and gentlemen, this is not going to be an easy. We shall continue to secure a bilateral meeting with the EU, and the EU is committed to provide a comprehensive report to all the questions raised in the WTO TPT committee. And also, we are optimistic that we're going to meet the EU before the March meeting, of which is planned by the World Trade Organization for the regular meeting. And this regular meeting will continue this work item. And once we have full detail as to say what the EU will do in this work item, we will definitely provide the necessary report. So at this stage, what we can confirm is that the discussion on the matter at the government level is underway, and also we want to take on board what has been presented by the speakers, particularly one item that talks to perhaps finding a way to have a policy that will address the pollinators and then present evidence to the EU and using the clause that I have just presented today. And also, we are considering to have a policy position that will have an element of reciprocity in the aspect of both export and import in the related matter. So, Chairperson, on that note, I would like to submit that report for your consideration. Thank you very much.